She thought it was a joke. She thought no one would ever solve it. She was wrong. Whoever solves this equation, I'll marry on the spot.
He'd seen this problem before, 3 years ago, in a life he thought he'd left behind.
Nobody was watching. So for the first time in 6 years, he let himself be brilliant again.
It wasn't wrong. It wasn't a prank. It was perfect. And nobody knew who wrote it yet.
Yes, it was me. I know it seems wrong, but she promised.
What exactly did she promise you?
The chalk dust hadn't even settled before Dr. Evelyn Hart turned around, smiled at her lecture hall of 200 students, and said the words that would change everything. Whoever solves this, I will marry on the spot. The room erupted in laughter, because everyone at Wexford University knew Dr. Hart's little joke wasn't really a joke. It was a dare, aimed at anyone bold enough to think they belonged in her classroom. If this is your first time hearing a story like this, welcome. And before you find out what happens when the wrong person overhears a rich woman's careless promise, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Because what happens next will make you believe again that quiet dignity always outlasts loud arrogance. Marcus Bell had been pushing a mop bucket down the same hallway for 6 years. Most of the students walked past him like he was part of the architecture, a tired man in a faded navy uniform, a name tag that read him Bell pinned crooked over his heart, a pencil always tucked behind his ear out of habit rather than necessity. What none of them knew, what he had never told a soul at Wexford, was that Marcus once sat in lecture halls just like this one, 3 years into a doctorate in theoretical mathematics at a university 2 states away, chasing a problem so difficult his advisor said solving it would make his career. Then his wife Denise got sick. The bills came faster than the fellowship checks. He left his program to work nights so he could sit with her during the day. And when she passed, he had a 4-year-old daughter, an unfinished dissertation gathering dust in a storage unit, and a mortgage that didn't care about grief. Wexford's maintenance department paid on time and never asked him what he used to be. That was enough, he told himself, for a long time. That evening, emptying the trash bin near the front of Dr. Hart's lecture hall, Marcus glanced up at the board, out of old habit. His whole body went still. It wasn't a classroom exercise. It was a real conjecture, one buried deep in a graduate seminar he'd once attended. A problem so stubborn that 3 different research teams had walked away from it in the last decade. Dr. Hart had scrawled it up there as a punchline, a way to remind 200 exhausted freshmen that they were nowhere close to as smart as they thought they were. Marcus stood with a trash bag in his hand and felt something he hadn't felt in years, the itch of a mind that refused to let a hard problem go unanswered. He didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table after his daughter Aaliyah had gone to bed, filling the backs of old work schedules with notation, chasing an approach he remembered abandoning in his own dissertation for a different reason. Piece by piece, the shape of a proof started to surface. He told himself he was just testing whether he still had it, that he'd wipe the board clean before anyone noticed and go back to being invisible in the morning. But something about seeing his own handwriting again, precise and confident after years of grocery lists and cleaning schedules, felt like coming up for air. 2 nights later, after the last student had filed out and the hall had gone dark except for the security lights, Marcus picked up a piece of chalk left in the tray and, hands slightly unsteady, began to write. He worked for almost 2 hours, erasing, correcting, working through the final steps of a solution he was almost certain was right. When he finished, he stood back, looked at the board full of tight, elegant mathematics, and for the first time in 6 years felt like himself. He didn't sign it. He told himself it didn't matter if anyone ever knew. Dr. Hart found it the next morning and nearly dropped her coffee. She checked it line by line, certain it had to be wrong, certain it had to be a prank from a rival colleague trying to embarrass her in front of her own department. It wasn't wrong. It was complete, and it was beautiful. Word spread through the math department by lunchtime, then to a research forum by evening, as these things do, into headlines by the end of the week. A mystery solver had cracked a problem that had stumped professionals for a decade inside an undergraduate lecture hall at WEXFORD. By the time this story reached the students who had sat in that very lecture hall and laughed along with Dr. Hart's joke, something shifted in them too. A few of them remembered the tired man with the mop bucket who never said much, who they'd never once thought to ask his name. Some felt a flicker of shame at how easily they'd looked past him for 6 straight years. Others simply felt astonished that greatness had been standing 3 feet away from them the entire time, wringing out a mop while they complained about homework. Professors from other departments started stopping by just to see the board for themselves, murmuring that the notation looked like something out of an advanced seminar, not a maintenance closet. A few colleagues quietly admitted they were more unsettled than impressed. If a janitor could solve what none of them had managed to touch in years, what did that say about the neat, comfortable hierarchy they'd built their careers on? The dean's office pulled security footage to solve the mystery everyone assumed involved a faculty member sneaking in after hours. Instead, the grainy video showed a janitor in a Navy uniform, alone, writing steadily on a chalkboard at 11 at night. When Dr. Hart saw the footage in the dean's office, her first reaction wasn't wonder. It was panic. She stood in front of her department chair, her colleagues, and eventually the man himself, and did what proud people sometimes do when they're cornered. She called it a stunt. A prank pulled by someone who had no business touching that chalkboard. And she demanded he be reprimanded, maybe even let go. Marcus stood in that office in his uniform, tired but steady, and for the first time in 6 years, he spoke his own story out loud. He told them about the doctoral program he never finished, about the wife he lost, about the daughter he raised alone on a janitor's salary, about how solving that problem was the first time in years he'd felt like more than someone who cleaned up after other people's brilliance. He didn't ask for an apology. He didn't ask for anything. He simply asked to keep his job. The room went quiet in a different way than it had a moment before. The dean, to her credit, didn't see a scandal. She saw a man who had been overlooked for 6 years by an institution that prided itself on finding talent. She pulled his old transcripts, called his former advisor, who remembered him instantly, and said losing Marcus from the program had always felt like an unfinished sentence. Within a week, Wexford offered him full readmission to a doctoral track, a research stipend, and because word travels fast and donors love, a redemption story, a scholarship fund in his late wife's name for his daughter's education. Dr. Hart had a harder road back. Publicly humbled, she spent weeks avoiding the hallway where the chalkboard still stood, roped off half-jokingly as a piece of department history. But brilliance recognizes brilliance eventually, even when pride gets in the way. And one afternoon she found herself standing in front of that board again, not laughing this time, studying the proof the way she should have studied it the first time, with respect. She sought Marcus out, not with an audience this time, and said the only honest thing she had left to say, that she was sorry, that she had mocked a room full of students to protect her own ego, and that the man she'd underestimated most had turned out to be sharper than half the faculty she worked with, herself included. She kept her word in the way that actually mattered. She stood beside him in every faculty meeting where his readmission was debated, championed his research, and made sure no one in that department ever again mistook the uniform for the whole of the man wearing it. What grew between them after that wasn't instant, and it wasn't a punchline anymore. It was built slowly, in the honest way real things are built. Late evenings in the same lecture hall, now filled with real conversation instead of trash bins and chalk dust. Two people who had both been humbled by the same problem and come out the other side, seeing each other clearly. 2 years later, when Marcus stood in front of a review committee to defend the dissertation he'd once left in a storage unit, Evelyn sat in the front row, and this time there was no joke in her eyes at all. Only pride. Marcus Bell still keeps that old pencil tucked behind his ear. Even now, back in a lecture hall as a professor instead of a janitor, because he never wants to forget who he was on the nights nobody was watching. His story spread across that campus and beyond it as proof of something everyone needs reminding of now and then. Talent doesn't disappear just because life forces you into a uniform nobody bothers to look twice at. It waits, and sometimes all it takes is one impossible problem, one quiet night, and one person brave enough to pick up the chalk dot if this story moved you even a little. Remember Marcus the next time you walk past someone whose job makes them easy to overlook. You never know what they left behind. And you never know what they're capable of picking back up. Thank you for watching until the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this one with someone who needs to hear it. And I'll see you in the next story.